And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, Ryan Metzler here today, and we're going to be looking at one of Dr. Knizia's titles. We're going to be looking at Ra. And Ra is a game for 2 to 5 players, and it's pretty much purely an auction game, and it's a good auction game. So, 2 to 5, it'll play in about 60 minutes, and it's suggested for about ages 12 and up. It's a very good game, it's pretty light, easy to pick up, so why don't we take a look at what's inside this box and what I think of the game. So as I mentioned, Ra is an auction game, and it's going to be taking place, and players are going to have these little sun tiles, which they're going to be auctioning, and these are made of wood, and they're of pretty good quality, and as you can see they have numbers printed on them. For example, this one is the 10. And these numbers are going to be sorted and distributed to players at the beginning of the games, depending on how many players you have. Each player is going to have a certain amount of tiles, and they'll be using these to bid on different tiles that will be flipped up throughout the game. So you'll be bidding these wooden suns for tiles. Additionally, what you can see here is the player board, which has several important features. First, you can see that there's an area here depicting a lot of pharaohs and some numbers on it. There's a 5, a 4, a 3, and a 2. And this is going to be how many Ras, or how many forced Ras, are going to be in each round of the game. For 5 players, there'll be this many starting here, and when this track fills up, that age will end. 4, 3 players, and then 2 players. So as fewer players, less rounds. At the bottom here, you can see that there are several squares for placement of tiles, and these tiles will be pulled from bags and placed on turns from players. And this is going to be what's up for auction. And so this will get filled up, and on a player's turn, they'll have the chance to call an auction, either using this Ra thing. They can invoke Ra by placing this wooden thing down and saying Ra, which can be quite fun, screaming out Ra and getting the auction started. Or if they pull a specific tile, for example, one of these Ra tiles, this is going to force an auction, and you'll place it along the track. If you have 5 players, you'll start here, and as I said, when this fills up, the age is going to end. So, either invoking Ra or being forced to invoke Ra will start an auction, and here players are going to have the chance to bid their sun tiles. And whoever bids the highest once around is going to get whatever tiles are here. Now, that said, you'll see players will have available token space up in front of them. So let's say I had the 7, the 10, and maybe the 9. Knowing what I have, you can actually force me to lose the auction, or you can, hedge that maybe I won't play one of these tiles, beating your highest played tile. Maybe if you have the 8, I may not want to play the 9 or the 10, so it's up to you to decide what you'd be willing to bid on whatever tiles are available. Anyhow, as the game goes on, this track will fill up, people will be purchasing different tiles, and they'll be using these tiles in order to score points. And at the bottom left-hand corner of the board here, you can actually see how different tiles will score, what they're used for, and how you may score points at the end of each age. Also included in the game are these small little cardboard chits, which are victory point tokens, and on them they have different values. They're going to be real hard to see, but you have 1s and 2s, you have 5s, and different values that you can use to keep track of your points throughout the game. They're kind of flimsy, but they're sufficient, they do the job, and they're easy enough to manage, although they do seem to always fall around in the box, and they're impossible to sort. The tiles that you'll be bidding for in Ra are all represented right here. Some of these you actually won't be bidding for, but most of them are tiles that you're going to be trying to win. And they all have different functions. So first, as I mentioned, these are the Ra tiles, and these are the ones you won't be bidding for. But when you draw one of these, you automatically place it on the board and an auction will start. And in these forced auctions, no one is required to bid on any of the tiles. So you could actually go through an entire auction, and you may not have anybody bid on anything. Anyhow, the rest of the tiles that you see here are either going to be things that score, or things that are detrimental to the person that draws them, or that buys them. The first thing you can see here are these God tiles, and God tiles are worth either 2 points at the end of a round, or on your turn, instead of drawing a tile or invoking an auction, you can play a God tile to take any tile from the auction area that's already been laid out. So if there's a tile that you really want that's up for auction, but an auction hasn't been started yet, you can use your God tile to pull it out of there, sacrificing 2 points. The Nile cards that you see here, these 2 right here, are worth 1 point each at the end of each scoring round. So once all the Ra space has been filled up on the board, these are going to be worth 1 point each. However, they're only worth 1 point each if you collect at least 1 flood tile. This is because you must have a flood tile in order to score each Nile, and that you'll get the total score of all floods and Niles that you have. So for example, if you were to have all 4 of these, you would get 4 points. At the end of the scoring area, all of your flood tiles go away, but your Niles will carry over. At the top here we have 3 different types of tiles, and the first is buildings. And buildings are going to score in 2 different ways. And they only score at the end of the game after the 3rd scoring round. Buildings will score 1 point for each different building you have up until you have 7 different buildings, at which point you'll get 10 points. If you have 8 different buildings, you'll get 15, and that's where that caps off. Additionally, if you have multiples of the same building, you will get 5 points if you have at least 3 of one type of building, 10 points if you have 4, and 15 points if you have 5. Pharaohs will score for only 1 player, and they will score each round, but they will only score for the player who has the most, getting 5 points. However, the player who has the fewest will lose 2 points each round. Civilization tiles will score only if you have at least 3 different civilizations, which will earn you 5 points. 4 different will earn you 10 points, and 5 different will earn you 15 points. However, if you were to have no civilization tiles at the end of an auction round, you will lose 5 points. Stop. Gold will be worth 3 points for each gold you have at the end of a round. At the end of each auction round, 2 types of tiles will be carried over, Niles and buildings, while all other tiles will be returned to the box. Lastly, there are destruction tiles, and these will destroy different facets or different types of tiles that are included in the game. And here I show 3 of them, so you can see a civilization destruction tile, you can see a Nile destruction tile, and you can see a Pharaoh destruction tile. And these are going to destroy the types of tiles that correspond to their pictures. So when these are won in an auction, something you might want to avoid depending on what type of tiles you're collecting, they're going to destroy 2 each of whatever types of tiles they depict. So this will destroy 2 civilizations, either from what's in the auction or what you've already collected. This will destroy 2 Niles, and this will destroy 2 Pharaohs. So on a player's turn, they're going to have 3 options of what to do. The first option is that they're going to draw a tile from the bag, and they're going to place it onto the board. So let's just say, for example, they drew this Nile, and they placed it onto the board, and now this starts what's available for auction. And players would go around on their turn, probably pulling tiles out and placing them on the board, until somebody decides that this is an auction, either that they don't want to get any bigger, or that they'd like to buy. So let's say maybe, for example, there are 2 Pharaohs, and somebody would like to buy this. And they're going to, on their turn, instead of placing a tile, invoke Ra. So they take this nice wooden figure, they slam it down on the board, and they say, Ra! And now they're going to start bidding. And the person to their left will begin the bidding. And they'll use one of their sun tiles that I showed you earlier to place a bid. And it will go around the board, and the last player will always have the final bid on something. So they can decide either if they want to win it, or if they've already been outbid to the point where they can't win it, they'll just pass, and the winner will take all of the tiles, and they'll be moved off the board into that player's play area. Now, there's a possibility on a player's turn when they're drawing a tile and placing it on the board that they're going to draw one of these Ra's, and this will force an auction. So if these tiles are out here, it will immediately start an auction with the player to their left, and they'll bid, and now nobody's forced to bid. On an invoked Ra, when you slam the figure down, the last player, the player who started the bid, is always forced to bid on the auction. So if nobody else decides to pay for it, they're forced into buying it, but may get it for cheap. With these invoked Ra's, nobody is ever forced to bid. The third option on your turn is to use one of these god tiles that you've won previously. So if you have one of these in your area, you can turn it in, returning it to the box, and take any tile from this area. So let's say I really needed a Sphinx. I turn my god tile in, I can take this and place it in my play area. When all of these Ra spots at the top fill up, depending on the amount of players, the round will end, and whoever hasn't bought anything for that round, or for the most recent auction phase, will be screwed and won't be able to buy anything. Which is a bad situation to end in, but you can always risk it by pulling more tiles, hoping that you won't get caught on the last Ra tile, and that you'll be able to buy something for cheap. A sun that is previously used to bid for something will be placed into the center of the board. That sun tile will then be available for purchase with the tiles on the board, and will dictate what players end up with what suns on their next turn. And in this manner, the amount of currency available to each player will change each auction round as the game goes on. So, not a bad game, again, not a great game, but something that I do like to keep around for lighter gameplay, maybe for, a filler-ish type game. It's not too short, it's not too long, it fits a nice little time spot. If you're a fan of auction mechanics, this one is very well done. it balances out nicely, what with you spending high amounts, but then maybe that high amount will be available to another player who gets a different tile combination. And, around the game, or throughout the game, the amount of money you have changes, trying to best figure out how to spend your money, maybe, buying tiles in order just to get money. There's a lot of strategic options to be had, and really, for a nice light game, a lot of thought can be put into the game.
Thanks for joining us today. For more written, audio, and video reviews, as well as the #1 board game podcast, check out the website at www.thedicetower.com. Until then, this is Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.